My question is for somebody that's trying to lower the ATPO, the antibody thyroid peroxidase. Recently, when I've done my labs, everything came normal. All the panels, chemistry, metabolic, everything, and including the TSH, T43. However, the ATPO came back to 6,000, where the range is 0 to 50. I'm not sure what the implications. I'm a plant-based diet. I had some gluten and dairy here and there, but trying to avoid them as much as possible. For 10 years, I had my ATPO around 250.
Okay.
And then going through some stressful times, it just raised, but never to 6,000. The most of it was 1,000. And now for like no reason,
6,
all of a sudden it was 6,000.
So when we look at, thanks for your question. I think you spoke yesterday. You tried to ask that question yesterday, and I didn't get to answer.
And I didn't get
sorry
to.
About that.
Yes,
thank you. The other people, there's too many people on the panel, so I didn't get to answer that question. So I appreciate you coming back on today. I like that tenacity of asking the question. So that just means the thyroiditis, right? The TP antibodies is like the Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Thyroiditis is inflammation for something. So we have to still look at, like, is there something in the plant-based diet that's still triggering an inflammatory response? Stress can actually just do it by itself. Viruses can actually do it by itself. So we even saw, during the pandemic, people that had COVID, again, just asymptomatically, not terrible, boom, TPO antibodies went off. Just like when people get a bad flu or a bad cold, same thing, TPO can go off. So it can be something as simple as a virus, something as simple as stress, but more importantly, we have to look at also, because remember, there's a stacking effect. You say, yeah, I was stressed, so it kind of went up from 50 to 100 or 1,000, but then there's something else. Now, again, we also will look at the microbiome, because if there's something wrong with the microbiome, you might be having something that you've been eating all the time, not having that much of a sensitivity, and all of a sudden it starts to flare because the absorption, the assimilation, the excretion of that food now can be becoming a food sensitivity, which it wasn't bothering you before. If you look back at the microbiome lecture, that'll explain a little bit of what we're talking about there, but that's what we would do. We would do the evaluation of looking at those, trying to find out what is that inflammatory trigger that causes the itis of the thyroid. I'll give you an example, taking bosmeric. Like if you were to take bosmeric, 2 twice a day, for example, make sure your vitamin D is around 70. Take it every day with your fat, because it's a fat soluble vitamin, and then just retest it like in a month. And if you start seeing it drop, then you already know that's just some kind of inflammatory response coming in the body. And then what you got to do is then they say, like, okay, let me make an appointment with you, Dr. Pai, or someone, and let's investigate what are those specific triggers coming in.
Thanks, Dr. Pai. That's great. And we're going to move now to Kaylee. Hi, Kaylee. Welcome.
Hi. Hi. Actually, I'm Kaylee's husband, and so I wanted to ask a question. I've been a vegan without any salt, oil, or sugar for 5 years. I also want to add that Kaylee has a group on Tuesday nights that reads a chapter from your book every week.
Oh, wow.
And there are a number of people in that group. So my problem is I have rhinitis. And we live in New York, where it's cold. I only have drops coming out of my nose in the wintertime. And Kaylee doesn't feel it adds anything to the salad or soup when it drops into the salad or soup. And so is there something I can do about rhinitis?
So so usually, believe it or not, a lot of people have rhinitis. Now, if it's due to the temperature, sometimes the temperature change, that can cause rhinitis. That's kind of like a vasodilation kind of issue, and then causes the runny nose. Some people, though, more often than not, if they have rhinitis almost throughout the year, say even if it's winter or even anything, and they're like, gosh, I'm still getting, it's not spring or summer, and I'm still getting, runny nose, then that's usually a food trigger. That's why we test for the food sensitivity, even if you're plant-based, right? Even if you're organic, blah, blah, because it still could be anything in the plant world that's still triggering that kind of response. There is natural things. We do have things that will help with the rhinitis, that if people are like, I don't want to do testing, but I just want to take it because that's what it is. Then we have something called Histoplus in our office. And those are the natural antihistamine ingredients, the flavonoids that actually will help. So instead of taking a Zyrtec or a Claritin or Allegra, those kind of things that can have a little bit of side effects, a lot of people want to be, get dry mouth and stuff like that. Then the Histoplus works just as well and has other health benefits. But we always like to look at the food first, because usually that's something that's like really underneath your nose. It's actually on your plate, and that's what's causing it. And you will never know until you test.
Thanks.
Thank you for reading the book, by the way.
Yeah, thank you for that as well, Dr. Pai. And up next, we have Margie. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Let's see if that works. Hi, Margie.
Yes, thank you very much. You're excellent. What do you think as far as in my smoothie every day, I buy organic ginger root from Costco, and I also put in the organic turmeric from Costco. So it's the large, it's the real plant.
The real plant. That's great. I mean, I love that. I mean, we should be, so like when we give it in the Bosmeric, what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to reverse disease, right? But we're trying to get ahead, like someone has a chronic inflammatory response. So I'm trying to get a pharmacological effect, but taking daily turmeric, just taking about 1/4 of a teaspoon or half a teaspoon a day, or a little nub, chop it in, putting in thing. Fantastic. Remember, there's other hundreds of compounds that are in turmeric by itself, just a turmeric root, that have wonderful benefits. And one of the things that we've done in our studies is that even though we put the 95% curcuminoids in there, we've actually calculated what's the minimum amount of just the regular part of the plant that is needed in the study to lower NF-kappa beta and tumor necrosis factor and inflammation. So the idea is that please eat it every day. I mean, you're going to get fiber, you're going to get a little protein, you get antioxidants, do that. We're just putting it in a pill. And the reason why is that when people actually have a headache, or they actually have a chronic inflammatory aspect, then what can they do instead of taking an ibuprofen or Motrin, something that has a black box warning? Let's give them something that's safe and more effective. But definitely, I recommend people eating those foods on a daily basis.
Thanks, Dr. Pai. And up next, we have David A. Hi, David.
Hi, how you doing? I had two questions real quick. You sounded like from yesterday's panel that you had concerns about coffee enemas and colon hydrotherapy. I was wondering if you could please elaborate what those concerns might be.
It disrupts the microbiome. So if you go back to my lecture and here on the microbiome, what happens is flushing the microbiome out. First of all, physiologically, nobody generically or traditionally we look at worldwide does enemas as a way of evacuation as a normal routine practice of healing. Just because it was in the 60s and just because Gershon and all these other things, these myths propagate on the internet, but that's that they didn't understand microbiome. Is evacuation when someone's eating a standard American diet and they're constipated chronically helpful in the beginning? Absolutely. They haven't pooped for days. Definitely get them to go. They'll feel much better. But you're not a Jiffy Lube car to go in and get, flushed out. What we're looking at is every time they're doing the flush out, you're actually losing your microbiome. Remember, there's over about 4 pounds of over 1,000 species of 100 trillion amounts of probiotics in your gut. When they use the 10 to 16 gallons of water that they're flushing out, that actually sucks out and pulls out. It's not just toxins. You're losing your microbiome, and you can't just take a little probiotic that has 10 or 25 billion to replace 100 trillion of 1,000 species when you can only get maybe 10 to 30, 40, 50 different species maximally. You still have to pass your stomach acid and all these other things so to actually get some kind of clinical benefits. We do provide probiotics that can do that, but we can't replace everything. And so the colonics is like a short-term gain of a long-term problem. What we have to do is have people actually eat better, eat more fiber, eat more plant-based, get the microbiome fixed. Then they don't need to have colonics or even coffee enemas. Coffee was really designed to be drinking from the mouth. I just saw a shirt the other day, the best part of waking up is coffee in your butt. I don't necessarily agree with that idea. I kind of like doing it the old fashioned way, but I'm an old fashioned guy. So just letting the polyphenols, the antioxidants, a little bit of the caffeine, all these other aspects, it's been shown, most people be drinking coffee orally. And so these are just kind of trendy things that we see that, can it have a short-term benefit? Sure. Is it absolutely needed for that person to get benefit, to get better? No, it's not. Because when we follow clinics, and I've been down in clinics in Mexico and all, and people are doing coffee enemas all the time and doing all these things. We don't see the data coming out showing any kind of, they still do it because people want it, people will sell it, people will pay for it. But just because it's offered doesn't mean it's healthy. Just because, Golden Arches says billions of burgers doesn't mean that's healthy nutrition. And so we have to be careful what people are listening to and what people are thinking, and then saying like, well, if you understand the microbiome, because we have people that when we test their microbiome before, and then they go to these places and test them after, it's gone. They've wiped out so many species. It all becomes pro-inflammatory. They have leaky gut. They have now dysbiosis. All this has occurred just from colon hydrotherapy or a coffee enema.
Thanks very much for that, Dr. Pai. And in fact, thanks so much for everything that you did here. We are moving on now. It's time to get into our next lecture. And so I just want to apologize. I'm sorry we can't get to every single question, but we appreciate everybody raising their hand, and stay tuned for the next time around. Dr. Pai, phenomenal as always. Really, really appreciate.
Thank you, everyone. And again, please go to our website, sungevity.net, sign up for our thing, look at Boston sign up for our newsletter, because if you want to find some evidence-based information going forward, definitely would like to listen on a podcast. We have interviewed many of the patients, the doctors on these panels. So if you want to have like an in-depth interview from my perspective with them, kind of going on back and forth, definitely sign up, and that'll be coming soon. So I appreciate everybody taking the time. And anytime you want to do a consult, I'll be glad to help you to get to optimum health. And thank you very much.